Today's we exploring The Power of Now book by Eckhart Tolle's audiobook summary. So start this book. If you also face these 3 problems, then you must listen to this entire book. Fast think, do you ever ask yourself, why do I feel mentally exhausted even when nothing major is happening in my life? Most people experience non-stop thinking and inner noise. Why does my mind keep replaying past mistakes, even though I want to move on? The book talks about being trapped in past-based identity. Why do I worry so much about the future, even when I know I can't control it? Almost everyone deals with future anxiety. So let's start it. It begins with a quiet realization, one that slowly rises like dawn breaking through years of inner clouds. You start to notice how much of your life has been shaped by resistance, by the subtle but constant tightening against what is happening right now. And as you observe this quiet struggle, you begin to understand that resistance has never given you the peace you long for. It has only multiplied your pain by adding layers of fear, judgment, and emotional weight to every moment. The more you push against life, the heavier it becomes, until even small moments feel like burdens you must carry. Then something shifts, perhaps not loudly, but unmistakably, like an inner door opening to a room you didn't know existed. You begin to sense that peace was never hiding in some distant future, or buried under achievements or people's approval. It was always here, in the simplicity of the present moment, waiting patiently for you to stop running long enough to feel it. At first, this presence feels almost delicate, as if you might lose it with a single thought. And yet it is also undeniable, a gentle stillness beneath all your mental noise. When you allow the present moment to be, without trying to shape it, escape it, or argue with it, something inside you softens. This softening is not weakness, but a quiet strength, a willingness to stop fighting reality and instead let life unfold. In that surrender, you begin to sense the deeper truth that everything in this world is impermanent. Every condition, every situation, every emotion rises and falls like waves on the ocean. When you stop clinging to the wave, you discover the ocean beneath it, the vast stillness of your own being. And when you are no longer desperate for the world to match your expectations, you notice something almost paradoxical happening. Life becomes lighter. Events flow more naturally. People and situations that once caused stress begin to lose their power over you. Not because they have changed, but because you no longer depend on them to feel whole. Happiness that once came from external sources suddenly appears from within, deeper and more stable than anything you've known. This inner peace does not mean you never feel sadness or discomfort. It means those feelings no longer define you. They pass through you the way wind passes through open space, without shaking the foundation of who you are. Slowly, you start to understand how deeply negativity had woven itself into your life. That resistance you carried was not just a mental habit. It was an emotional pattern, a subtle tension that took the form of irritation, impatience, anger, resentment, anxiety, sadness, or that heavy hopelessness that can feel like drowning. And you realize that each of those emotions was simply the body's reaction to the mind refusing to accept the present moment. The more you resisted, the more the emotion tightened. The more you tightened, the more the mind tried to use negativity as a tool, believing it could force life to change just by being unhappy about it. But it never worked. Negativity only made everything feel worse. It never brought solutions, only suffering. As you see this clearly, you begin to recognize that the ego thrives on such negativity. It strengthens itself through drama, through conflict, through feeling wronged or harmed or misunderstood. Once you identify with these emotions, they become part of your identity, as if you are the anger, the pain, the story of how life has treated you. And in that identification, you lose sight of the deeper self that is always present beneath the surface. But when you step back and observe these emotions without feeding them, you open a small space inside you. In that space, awareness enters, and the tight grip of the ego begins to loosen. You start to understand that negativity is not natural. It is a kind of psychic pollution that only humans carry, an emotional fog created by the mind's refusal to be here and now. No other life form suffers the way humans do. A tree doesn't resent the weather. A flower doesn't worry about tomorrow. A bird doesn't hold grudges. They simply exist, fully present, fully aligned with life. And when you watch them, when you sit with their silent wisdom, something inside you remembers how to be simple again, how to live without turning every experience into a problem, how to allow life to flow through you instead of against you. As this understanding deepens, you begin to notice subtle moments of freedom, moments when a situation that once triggered anger now brings only a soft awareness, moments when discomfort arises and you allow it instead of fighting it, moments when the present feels spacious, open, without the weight of the past or the pressure of the future. These moments are like windows into another way of being, a way where peace is not something to chase, but something to relax into. And with every breath, you realize that this peace was never missing. Only your attention was. There comes a moment when you look at your own reactions and realize how effortlessly the mind can create storms out of ordinary circumstances. A small inconvenience turns into frustration, a careless remark becomes an insult, a minor setback grows into a personal failure. And as you watch yourself move through these moments, you begin to see that the real suffering never comes from the situation itself, but from the layer of resistance wrapped around it. It is that tightening, that refusal to accept what is, that transforms a passing event into an emotional burden. When you truly observe this pattern, not with judgment but with quiet curiosity, you start to feel how much unnecessary weight you have been carrying. Every irritation, every complaint, every moment of impatience has been a subtle way of saying no to life. And life, in turn, feels heavy because of that refusal. Then, gradually, a new awareness begins to take shape within you. You start recognizing these reactions as they arise, not after they explode, but in the very moment they begin. It feels like catching a spark before it becomes a flame. And in that pause, in that tiny breath of awareness, you discover the freedom to choose. You can feed the emotion, let the mind build its story, and pull you into the familiar drama, or you can simply watch the feeling without acting on it. When you choose the latter, something remarkable happens. The emotion begins to dissolve on its own. You didn't suppress it, you didn't fight it, you just allowed it to be. And in that allowing, it loses its power over you. As you continue to observe yourself this way, the inner space grows wider. You begin noticing that emotions are not personal. They are energies passing through the body, triggered by the mind's interpretations. Without those interpretations, the emotions have nowhere to attach. They rise, they fall, and then they disappear, leaving a gentle calm behind. This calm is not something you create. It is something that was always there beneath the noise. And every time you touch this calm, even for a moment, you recognize it as your true home. It becomes clearer to you that the mind, when left unobserved, can turn even the smallest memory into suffering. It drags the past into the present and uses it to color every experience. You start to notice how often your reactions are shaped not by what is happening now, but by echoes of old wounds, old patterns, old fears. Without realizing it, you had been living through the lens of a past that no longer exists. But when you bring full attention to the present moment, that lens begins to dissolve. What remains is a raw, honest presence that does not carry the burden of yesterday. And from that presence, life appears new again, uncluttered, open, full of possibility. The more you experience this presence, the more deeply you understand that peace is not fragile. It does not depend on circumstances being favorable. It lives beneath the surface of every moment, even moments filled with discomfort or emotion. You begin to see that peace does not mean the absence of life's challenges, but the absence of resistance to those challenges. When something unexpected happens, instead of tightening, you breathe. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of running into a story, you stay with the pure sensation of the moment. In that staying, you find a strength that has nothing to do with force. It is the strength of surrender, the strength of openness, the strength of not needing life to be any different from what it is right now. As this inner shift unfolds, you become more sensitive to the presence in all living things. You look at a tree and feel its quiet acceptance of the seasons. You watch an animal or a bird and notice how effortlessly it drops the past. You witness how nature moves through cycles of change without resistance, without complaint, without losing itself. And something inside you recognizes the same natural rhythm. You realize that you, too, are meant to exist with that simplicity, that clarity, that presence. Life becomes less of a problem to solve and more of a mystery to experience moment by moment. Even in situations that once seemed overwhelming, you feel a subtle grounding. You sense that beneath every difficulty lies an invitation to awaken more deeply. Slowly, the old habit of identifying with your thoughts weakens. The mind continues to generate stories, fears, judgments, opinions, but you no longer merge with them. You watch them come and go like clouds drifting across the sky. Sometimes they are dark and heavy, sometimes light and harmless, but the sky itself, the awareness that witnesses it all, remains untouched. And as you stay rooted in that awareness, something profound begins to happen. The world around you feels less threatening, less demanding. People's actions no longer hook you as easily. The ups and downs of life still occur, but they no longer shake your inner foundation. You move through life with a softness that has nothing to do with weakness. It is a softness born from clarity, from knowing that you are more than any thought, any emotion, any story. And in this unfolding presence, you begin to taste a deeper joy. Not the kind of joy that depends on achievements or praise or perfect conditions, but a quiet, steady joy that arises from simply being. A joy that needs no reason. A joy that grows the more present you become. It is like discovering that beneath all the noise and worry of life, there is a river of peace that has always been flowing. And all you ever needed to do was stop long enough to feel it. There comes a point in your inner journey when you begin to sense that the deepest obstacles you face are not created by the world, but by the constant voice inside your head. It comments, it compares, it judges, it warns, it imagines, and it rarely allows a moment of pure silence. You start to notice that this voice never simply observes life as it is. It always tries to shape it into something else. And as you watch the mind with a little more distance, you begin to understand how exhausting it has been to carry that voice as your identity. You realize that almost every moment of restlessness you have ever felt was fueled by this internal narrator, insisting that the present is incomplete, that something is missing, that something must change before you can be at peace. And in that realization, a space opens, a space where the voice continues, but no longer defines you. This is when you start to glimpse the profound truth that the mind is not a problem, but identification with the mind is. Thoughts can be useful, thoughts can guide you through practical matters, but thoughts become burdens when they take root as unquestioned truth. You begin watching the patterns more carefully, noticing how negative thoughts create negative emotions, how fearful thoughts create tension, how judgmental thoughts create separation. It becomes clear that the mind is not reacting to life, but to its own stories about life. And the more you witness this process, the clearer it becomes that genuine peace cannot come from rearranging those thoughts, but from stepping back and letting them pass like wind across still water. As this inner observing grows stronger, you start to feel a subtle shift in the relationship between you and your emotions. Instead of being swept away by waves of anger or anxiety, you begin sensing the moment they arise, almost like vibrations moving through the body. And if you remain present with these sensations without naming them, without trying to stop them, without making them personal, something extraordinary happens. The feelings soften, loosen, and gradually dissolve, leaving behind a quiet clarity. It feels as though you are finally allowing emotions to complete their natural life cycle instead of trapping them with resistance. In those moments, a deep wisdom unfolds, showing you that emotions are not enemies to conquer, but energies to witness with compassion. There is a growing sense that beneath the movement of thoughts and emotions, beneath the complexities of your personal history, there is a stillness waiting to be recognized. It is not dramatic or loud. It does not demand attention. It is simply there, like a soft glow behind everything you experience. And as you spend more time resting in that stillness, you sense that it is the most authentic part of you, the part untouched by disappointment or fear or desire. It feels like remembering something you knew long ago, but forgot in the noise of living. Every time you return to this quiet presence, something inside you expands gently, like a flower unfolding in the early light. With this awareness, life begins to show itself in a new way. Ordinary moments feel richer, as if the world has more depth than you ever realized. You find yourself listening more closely when someone speaks, not just to their words but to the aliveness behind them. You start to notice how often people live trapped inside their own mental noise, just as you once did, and instead of judging them, you feel a soft compassion arising. You realize that every person you encounter is carrying invisible burdens, wrestling with thoughts they cannot escape, longing for peace they cannot name. And this recognition opens the heart in a way the mind never could. Slowly, it becomes clear that presence is not something you practice for a few minutes and then forget. It is a way of inhabiting each moment, a way of stepping fully into the aliveness of whatever is happening. Even simple actions begin to take on a new quality. Washing your hands, drinking water, walking across a room. Each movement feels grounded, deliberate, connected. And in this simplicity, you discover something the mind never understood. That peace is always found in what is simple, what is direct, what is here. The mind searches endlessly for something to complete it, but presence reveals that completeness has been quietly available in every breath you have ever taken. There are moments when the mind tries to pull you back into old patterns, moments when fear or irritation tries to hook your attention again. But now you see these moments more clearly. You recognize the mind's attempts to recreate familiar suffering, and instead of being captured, you smile softly at the old habits. The awareness that watches these patterns is stronger than the patterns themselves. And gradually, a deep inner confidence begins to grow. Not confidence in the sense of ego or achievement, but confidence in your ability to remain grounded in presence no matter what unfolds. As you continue walking this inner path, you begin to sense the emerging of a new kind of freedom. It is not the freedom to control life, but the freedom to stop resisting it. Not the freedom to avoid discomfort, but the freedom to meet discomfort without losing yourself. It is the freedom of knowing that who you truly are cannot be touched by passing thoughts, shifting emotions, or temporary circumstances. This freedom feels like a quiet, radiant strength rising from within, a strength not rooted in force but in deep acceptance of what is. And in this acceptance, life becomes less about surviving the next moment and more about inhabiting this one fully. The need to rush fades. The need to prove something fades. The need to protect an imagined identity fades. What remains is a clear, open awareness, a gentle presence that feels both intimate and expansive at the same time. And as you rest in this presence, you begin to sense that this stillness, this clarity, this openness is the essence of who you have always been. There comes a moment in your inner unfolding when you begin to understand how deeply the past has shaped the way you see yourself, and how tightly the future has pulled you away from the place where life is actually happening. You realize that for most of your life, you have been pulled between memories that continue to echo in your mind and imagined futures that have not yet arrived. And as this becomes clearer, something inside you softens, almost as if you are waking up from a long and restless dream. You begin to sense that the weight you have been carrying was never the events themselves, but the ongoing replay of those events in your mind. There is a tenderness in this realization, a kind of gentle heartbreak, as if you suddenly see how long you have lived away from yourself. You start noticing how often the mind brings up old pain, repeating old stories, living inside old wounds. And for the first time, instead of diving into those memories as if they define you, you simply watch them rise and fall like distant whispers. You realize that the past does not ask to be relived, it only asks to be seen with presence. And the moment you meet it with awareness instead of resistance, a strange and quiet healing takes place. It feels like the knots of old pain slowly loosen, not because you force them, but because you are no longer feeding them. As this understanding deepens, your relationship with the future begins to shift as well. You notice how often the mind jumps ahead, imagining outcomes, rehearsing conversations, fearing possibilities that may never come to pass. You see how the body tenses when the mind leaps into these imagined futures, as if preparing for storms that exist only in thought. And gradually, you begin recognizing that the future, when seen through the mind's anxious projections, is never peaceful. It is only in stepping back into this moment, into this breath, that you rediscover the safety and clarity that were here all along. There is a gentle strength in realizing that you are not obligated to follow every anxious thought the mind creates. You start seeing that these thoughts are not predictions, they are habits. And each time you bring yourself back to the simplicity of now, the grip of those habits loosens. You begin to notice moments of real presence appearing more often, moments when you look around and truly see your surroundings, moments when you listen without rushing to respond, moments when you feel the aliveness of your own body. These moments feel quiet but deeply real, as if life itself is finally allowed to breathe. With this shift, something remarkable begins to awaken inside you. You start sensing the presence of your own being beneath the movement of time. It is not tied to who you used to be or who you hope to become. It simply is. This presence feels steady, calm, unshaken by the storms of thought or emotion. And as you rest in it more often, you begin understanding that this presence is the very essence of peace. Not peace that comes from perfect circumstances, but peace that arises from fully embracing this moment as it unfolds. You begin seeing that life always happens here, in the richness of this instant, and that everything you truly need for this moment is already present. You discover that when you meet life as it is, without dragging the past behind you or chasing the future ahead of you, something inside opens. It feels like a gentle exhale you didn't know you were holding, a soft release that allows you to inhabit your own existence fully. You start experiencing moments of simple joy, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the softness of your breath, the sound of wind moving through leaves, and these moments feel more alive than anything the mind could imagine. There is a growing sense of trust that begins to form, not a trust in events turning out a certain way, but a trust in your own capacity to remain grounded no matter what comes. You recognize that presence does not eliminate challenges. It transforms the way you meet them. Even when difficulties arise, you find yourself returning to the stillness within, and from that stillness, you respond rather than react. You feel more spacious, more compassionate, more connected to yourself and to others. And as this new way of living deepens, you begin to sense the subtle but beautiful truth at the heart of Eckhart Tolle's teaching, that the doorway to freedom is not hidden in some distant future or buried in the memory of the past. It opens right here, in the simple willingness to be fully present with what is. And in this presence, you begin to rediscover a dimension of life that feels timeless, luminous, and quietly profound, as if the very essence of your being is revealing itself one moment at a time. There is a moment in your journey when you begin to sense that the world around you is not nearly as solid or fixed as the mind once insisted. You notice how two people can stand before the same situation, yet experience it in completely different ways, shaped not by what is happening, but by the thoughts and emotions each person brings into it. And as this realization dawns on you, something softens inside. You understand that what you call the outer world is deeply intertwined with your inner state, and that peace cannot come from trying to control everything around you. It comes from tending to what is happening within. You start sensing how easily the mind creates friction with reality. A delay, a disagreement, a change of plans. Anything can stir resistance. And yet, when you pause long enough to observe your reaction rather than follow it, you notice a quiet truth. The moment you resist what is happening, tension arises. The instant you stop resisting, something opens. It does not mean you approve of the situation or pretend it feels good. It simply means you stop adding the weight of mental struggle to it. You let the moment be what it already is. And in that acceptance, a surprising amount of clarity and strength returns. There is a gentle beauty in noticing how life flows when you stop arguing with it. Even challenges lose some of their sharpness when you meet them without the extra layer of mental opposition. You begin to see that acceptance is not weakness. It is a form of wisdom. It creates the space in which true action becomes possible. Because when you are no longer entangled in resistance, you can see what needs to be done with more precision, more calmness, and more compassion for yourself and others. As you deepen into this awareness, the world around you begins to feel more alive. You start feeling the subtle energy of presence in everyday situations, the steadiness in your own posture, the rhythm of your breath, the sensation of your hands resting on a table. Even mundane interactions take on a different quality. You notice the warmth in someone's voice, the hesitation behind their words, the silent stories they carry but do not speak. And instead of reacting from old patterns, you find yourself responding from a deeper space of presence, as if something wiser within you is guiding the way. You start to sense that this presence is not something you create. It is something you uncover by letting go of everything that obscures it. Each time you release unnecessary thoughts, each time you breathe into this moment without expectation, each time you allow yourself to simply be, you peel back another layer. And beneath every layer, there is more stillness, more openness, more peace. It feels like descending into a quiet sanctuary inside yourself, a place untouched by noise, untouched by time, untouched even by the stories you once believed were essential to your identity. In this quietness, you begin seeing through one of the mind's biggest illusions, the illusion that you are separate from life. You sense, perhaps for the first time in a long while, that you are not standing apart from the world but moving with it, part of its unfolding. The wind, the breath, the heartbeat, the passing clouds, the sounds of distant voices, all of it feels connected, woven into a larger tapestry of existence. And when you rest in that awareness, even for a few seconds, a deep peace rises from within, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, but on your willingness to be present with what is already here. There are days when the mind still tries to pull you back into old fears, old worries, old narratives. But now you recognize these moments more quickly. You see the familiar patterns forming, the tightening in the stomach, the rush of thoughts trying to gain control. And instead of being swallowed by them, you breathe. You return to the awareness that watches these thoughts. You allow them to come and go. And as you do, you notice something important. The thoughts lose their power when you stop giving them your identity. In this discovery, a quiet joy begins to emerge, not the kind that depends on excitement or success, but a gentle, lasting joy that arises from simply being alive in this moment. You begin to realize that the present is not just a moment in time. It is a doorway, and each time you walk through it with awareness, you reconnect with the essence of yourself, the part that is spacious, still, and deeply at peace. This is the beginning of living with a different kind of sensitivity, a different kind of presence. You start noticing that the more you reside in this state, the more naturally kindness flows through you. Compassion becomes effortless. Patience arises without being forced. You listen more deeply, feel more clearly, and respond more authentically. And life, which once felt like a series of problems to solve or obstacles to overcome, begins to feel more like a dance, a movement of experiences that come and go, while the stillness within you remains steady and unchanged. In that stillness, you discover a truth that feels both simple and profound. You are not separate from the present moment. You are the present moment, and the more you align yourself with this truth, the more fully you come alive. As you move deeper into this journey of presence, there comes a moment when you begin noticing how effortlessly the mind tries to pull you back into its old territories. It reaches for past stories, for imagined futures, for familiar patterns of worry and anticipation, as if it cannot bear the simplicity of the present moment. And even though these patterns arise, something has shifted within you. You now recognize the pull not as truth, but as habit, ancient habit, deeply conditioned, yet no longer unquestioned. You start observing how the mind loves to dramatize, how it shapes simple situations into complex narratives, how it clings to grievances and fears as though they define who you are. But each time you catch a glimpse of this unconscious movement, you feel a subtle opening, a breath of spaciousness that was not there before. You realize that awareness itself is dissolving the weight of the old patterns. You do not have to fight the mind, you simply have to see it clearly, and in that clear seeing, its grip loosens. There is something beautiful in recognizing this shift. It feels like standing at the threshold of two worlds, one filled with noise and restless thought, the other quiet and spacious, waiting patiently for you to step inside. And every time you choose presence, every time you return to the feeling of your breath or the aliveness in your body, you take another step toward the inner world where peace is not something to seek, but something already yours. You also begin to notice how your relationships change when you meet others from a place of presence. Instead of reacting to their emotions or their unconscious patterns, you see beneath the surface. You sense the deeper being behind their words, even when they speak from fear or frustration. And in that silent recognition, something softens, a gentle compassion, an understanding that everyone is carrying invisible burdens, and that sometimes the most healing thing you can offer is your calm, undisturbed presence. Even in moments of conflict, presence brings a kind of inner spaciousness. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself at every turn or prove your point in every exchange. You find yourself listening more openly, speaking more intentionally, and choosing silence when silence is what brings truth forward. There is strength in this silence, not passivity. It is the strength of someone who is rooted deeply, who does not need the mind's noise to feel secure. And slowly, the world around you begins to feel different, not because it changed, but because the one who experiences it has changed. What once felt threatening now feels less personal. What once triggered frustration now becomes an opportunity to return to awareness. And what once seemed mundane begins to shimmer with a quiet aliveness. The movement of trees in the wind, the subtle shifting of light through a window, the almost musical rhythm of ordinary sounds. In these moments, you discover that presence is not something you have to maintain through effort. It is what naturally arises when you stop feeding the mind's compulsive stories. It is what remains when you let go of past and future. It is the gentle stillness beneath every movement, the silent space in which all things appear. As this realization deepens, you begin to taste a profound inner freedom, a freedom that does not depend on circumstances or achievements or validation. It is like discovering a refuge inside yourself, a place untouched by worries, untouched by time, untouched even by the changing conditions of your life. And you start returning to this refuge more often, not because you force yourself to, but because it simply feels like home. In this inner home, you realize that true peace is not the absence of challenges, but the absence of resistance to what is. Life still brings its cycles of change, its unexpected turns, its joys and its sorrows. But instead of being tossed around by every wave, you find yourself resting in the quiet depth beneath the surface, grounded in a stillness that remains unshaken. That stillness carries you into a new way of seeing yourself. You begin to sense that your identity is not contained in your thoughts or your memories, not in your achievements or your roles, not in anything the world can give or take away. Your true identity is the awareness that sees, the presence that remains, the consciousness that quietly observes everything arise and fall away. And as this realization grows, fear begins to loosen its hold, because fear belongs to the mind, and the mind no longer defines you. With this freedom comes a deeper trust in life. You start sensing an underlying intelligence, a quiet guidance that moves through each moment. You feel it when you pause before acting, when you breathe before speaking, when you let go before reacting. It feels like life itself is carrying you, like you are no longer navigating the world alone, but moving with a deeper current that knows the way even when you don't. And slowly, gently, almost without noticing, you realize that you are awakening, not into something new, but into the truth that has been here all along, waiting for you to return to it. As your awareness continues to expand, you begin sensing something extraordinary about the present moment, something you may have overlooked your entire life. It is not merely a point in time, it is a living space, a field of pure stillness that holds everything without strain. Whenever you settle into this space, you notice that the mind quiets almost automatically, as if it recognizes that it is no longer required to run the entire show. And in that quiet, you find a kind of relief that feels deeper than rest, deeper than sleep, deeper than anything the world ever gave you. This stillness has a presence to it, a quiet glow that does not need words or explanations. It feels like standing inside a calm, radiant emptiness where nothing is missing and nothing is out of place. And the more you touch this space, the more you realize that peace is not something you create. It is something you uncover by stepping out of resistance. Even emotions that once felt heavy and overwhelming begin to soften in the light of this awareness. Anger dissolves faster, fear loses its sharpness, sadness becomes more fluid and less suffocating. You start to notice that emotions are simply energies passing through the body, not definitions of who you are. At times you might even feel as though life is moving with you instead of against you. You notice synchronicities that appear like quiet whispers, guiding you toward the right action, the right moment, the right insight. And although you cannot explain this guidance through logic alone, you can feel its accuracy, its quiet intelligence. It's almost as if the moment itself is alive and communicating with you, and all you need to do is stay present enough to hear it. Through this shift, your relationship with challenges changes as well. Instead of seeing them as obstacles to your peace, you begin viewing them as invitations into deeper presence. Every difficulty, every moment of discomfort, becomes a mirror showing you where resistance still lives inside you. And when you choose presence rather than struggle, the challenge often transforms into clarity. What once felt unbearable becomes a doorway into a deeper kind of freedom. You also begin sensing a new compassion for yourself, a softness toward your own imperfections. You no longer treat your flaws as enemies to be beaten down or hidden. You meet them with the same gentle awareness that you offer to others, understanding that every part of you is simply seeking acknowledgement. In this acceptance, old patterns start to lose their power because they no longer have the friction of self-rejection to hold them in place. In your relationships, this compassion becomes even more powerful. You find yourself responding rather than reacting, listening without the need to interrupt, speaking without the need to impress or defend. You begin to recognize that the person in front of you is struggling with the same mind-made burdens that once held you captive. And this understanding brings a deeper patience, a deeper tenderness, even when conflicts arise. Presence begins to heal what effort alone never could. There is a moment, one that often comes quietly, when you notice that peace has become more than a temporary state. It begins to feel like a background presence beneath everything, a silent foundation that remains steady even when life becomes chaotic. You might still experience frustration or worry, but they no longer consume you. They pass like weather, noticeable but temporary. What remains is the awareness that witnesses it all, the spaciousness that lets everything move through without becoming tangled in it. And as this spaciousness grows, you begin to sense something even more profound. You start feeling as though life itself is happening through you rather than to you. Actions flow more effortlessly, decisions arise with less doubt, intuition becomes clearer, and your sense of meaning deepens. You no longer feel disconnected or isolated. Instead, you feel intertwined with everything, as though the boundaries that once separated you from the world have softened. There is a quiet joy in this interconnectedness, a sense of belonging that does not rely on anyone's approval or attention. When you experience this even for a moment, you realize something astonishing, that joy does not come from external conditions at all. It arises naturally when you are fully present, because presence itself is joy. It is not a joy that depends on gain or achievement. It is a joy that wells up simply from being alive. And when you taste that joy, even briefly, it feels like a homecoming, as if you have returned to a truth you somehow forgot. In time, presence begins to infuse even your smallest actions. Ordinary moments become strangely luminous. Washing your hands, opening a door, feeling the warmth of sunlight on your skin. All of it feels more vivid, more immediate, more real. The world appears richer, as though you are seeing it without the filter of thought for the first time. And in these moments of simple awareness, you understand that life was never meant to be a constant struggle towards some imagined future. Life is happening here, in the soft glow of every breath, in the quiet rhythm of your own being. As this realization deepens, gratitude begins to arise naturally, not as a practice or a moral obligation, but as an effortless response to the beauty of being present. You feel grateful for ordinary things, the breath that moves through you, the ground beneath your feet, the chance to experience even the simplest sensations. And this gratitude becomes a steady flame, illuminating moments that once felt dull or meaningless. Eventually, you come to see that presence is not just a spiritual idea, but a living reality, a doorway into your true nature. And every time you step into that doorway, you feel a little freer, a little lighter, a little more yourself. This is the quiet miracle of awakening, not a dramatic moment of transformation, but a gradual unfolding, a slow remembering, a gentle return to the vast stillness that has always been here, waiting patiently for your attention. As your journey into presence matures, something extraordinary begins to take shape inside you, not through any effort or struggle, but through a quiet opening that deepens little by little, almost without your noticing. It feels as if the space within you has become wider, more grounded, more rooted in something that does not waver when circumstances shift. Even when life becomes uncertain, even when old patterns momentarily rise again, there is a deeper clarity that remains untouched, like a calm sky holding the passing clouds. You begin to sense that your identity was never the stream of thoughts running through your mind, never the constant commentary or the stories you once clung to. Your identity was not the pain you carried, nor the fears that once shaped your choices. Something far deeper has always been here, watching gently from the background, patiently waiting for you to recognize it. And now, as presence grows stronger, that deeper part of you steps forward with a quiet, unwavering confidence. It does not shout or demand attention. It simply is steady and luminous. In this state, your relationship with life changes in a profound way. Instead of moving through the world seeking constant reassurance, you begin to feel as if reassurance rises from within you. Instead of chasing meaning, you start discovering that meaning reveals itself the moment you fully arrive. And instead of fearing the unknown, you begin to sense a kind of curiosity toward it, because the unknown no longer feels like a threat. It feels like an open space where new life can unfold. There may still be moments when old wounds surface, when echoes of past hurts try to pull you back into their familiar gravity. But now, instead of being swallowed by them, you meet them with the light of awareness. You feel them as energy, as movement, as something temporary that wants simply to be seen. And as you let them be without resistance, something magical happens. They soften, they unravel, they dissolve. What once held you tightly now loses its grip, because presence does not feed suffering, presence melts it. With this softening, your relationship with other people becomes more genuine. You no longer need them to complete you, to validate you, or to fix the parts of you that were once in conflict. Instead, you meet them with openness, with patience, with an understanding that everyone is fighting the same inner battles in different shapes. You begin to see their reactions not as personal attacks, but as reflections of their own inner struggles. And in that understanding, compassion grows naturally without effort. You offer kindness not because you should, but because it flows from the peace you carry. This shift also brings a new sense of freedom in how you act. You no longer live from a place of fear or from the urge to control every outcome. Instead, actions arise more spontaneously, guided by a quiet intelligence within you. You speak more authentically, not rehearsing your words in your mind, but allowing them to flow as they come. You choose more intuitively, sensing which direction feels aligned without drowning in doubt. And even when you make mistakes, you don't collapse into self-criticism the way you once did. You simply adjust, learn, and continue, gently, calmly, without losing yourself. Over time, this way of being starts to feel natural, as if you are finally returning to something you had forgotten long ago. Life begins to hold a different texture. There is a softness to it, a depth, a subtle radiance. Even the simplest moments, the sound of wind moving through leaves, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the rhythm of your breathing, feels somehow more alive. You notice that the world has not changed. You have changed, and therefore everything appears clearer, more vibrant, more immediate. And as this clarity deepens further, you start to sense that presence is not something you experience. It is something you are. You are the space in which thoughts appear and disappear. You are the stillness beneath every emotion, the calm behind every breath. You are the awareness that holds everything without being touched by any of it. And in realizing this, you discover a kind of inner strength that cannot be taken from you, no matter what life brings. From this place, you no longer chase peace. Peace radiates from you. You no longer chase love. Love flows through you. You no longer chase meaning. Meaning is woven into every moment you fully inhabit. Life becomes a partnership rather than a struggle, a dance rather than a battlefield. And even when challenges arise, you face them with a steady heart, knowing that nothing in the external world can shake the stillness that has awakened within you. This is the quiet transformation that presence brings, not a dramatic explosion of enlightenment, but a gentle unfolding, a soft returning, a gradual remembering of your own essence. And as you continue to live from this awareness, you realize something profoundly beautiful. The power you sought in the future, the peace you hoped to find in circumstances, the fulfillment you believed you needed to earn. all of it has been waiting for you here, in the living stillness of this moment. And so, as this journey reaches its gentle closing, you discover that the true miracle was never in escaping the world, but in entering it fully. Not in changing the conditions of your life, but in dissolving the resistance within you. Not in becoming someone new, but in uncovering the presence that has always been quietly shining at your center. And with this discovery, you step forward into your life with a steady, open awareness, knowing that whatever comes, the now will carry you, guide you, and awaken you, again and again, into the infinite depth of being.